All right, class. Today's video is on dominant range for the STAAR review. Now, dominant range refers to the set of all possible uh, x values, and range refers to the set of all possible y values. Okay. Now, on dominant range, you'll see the closed circle, and the symbol we use for that is the greater than or equal to, or the less than or equal to. And for the open circle, we use the greater than or less than. All right. So let's look at some examples. Here we have two parabolas. Now, one thing that I want you to remember is this. When you have a parabola, right, where there are no restrictions, the domain is always all real numbers. So for this graph right here, all right, because there are no restrictions on the graph, all right, we have arrows on the end. The domain is always all real numbers. Now the range is different. On the second graph too, if you look at it, all right, it's flipped, it's open downwards, and it has arrows on both ends. Again, the domain is always all real numbers. All right. So let's go ahead and work on this. So domain, let's put D for domain and all for range. Okay. All right. So when you try to find a domain, right, what I want you to do is you're going to draw a line on the left side of the graph and on the right side of the graph, because domain again are x values, and that's on the x-axis. So I want to look at the left side of the graph. I want to draw a line on the left side of the graph where it starts, all right, or where it ends. Okay, right there. And that's not a straight line, but you get the picture. And on the right side, okay. Now let's count off our units. Okay. Let's see. On the left side, I'm going to have a -1 and -2. If you notice now, the line, right, on the left side is an arrow on the graph. So therefore, that means that the x values, right, just keeps on going to the left. So therefore, it goes to -infinity. And on the right side, if I count up the units, I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But if you look at it, the line touches the arrow. That just means that the graph keeps on going, and therefore the x value just keep on going to the right, and so it goes to positive infinity. And so that's why we say the domain, or the domain, right, is all real numbers. And so we can put domain is all real numbers. All right. Now let's look at the range. Now remember, range is the height of the graph. We're going to go along the y-axis. So again, I'm going to get my highlighter. Let's go with green. So I'm going to find the lowest point on the graph. All right, the lowest point is right there. And then I'm going to find the highest point, which is right here. But if you notice now, because the graph has arrows, there's no high point on the graph. The graph just keeps on going. Now, on the lowest point, let's count out the units for the lowest point. Okay, so this is -1, -2. The lowest point is -2 on the graph. If you notice now, there are no y values down here. There's no y values. All the y values for this graph are going this way. All right. Therefore, the range is going to be all the y values that are greater than -2. So I can write that as y is greater than or equal to -2. All right, for the range. Again, the range does not stop at 6 because there's arrows, right? It just means that the y values keeps on going all the way up to infinity. All right. All right, so that's for the parabola when the graph opens upward. Let's look at this one here where the graph opens downward. Again, we know the domain is going to be all real numbers. Domain is going to be all real numbers. All right. And again, we can go through it one more time so you can see. On the left side of the graph, I'm going to draw my line. Can I get it straight this time? Yes. On the right side, I'm going to draw my line, and that is straight. And if you count off the units on the left side, I'm going to get negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right. But if you notice at 7, right, the line touches the arrow. That just means that the graph keeps on going, and so the x value just keeps on going that way. And likewise on the right, okay, on the right, if I count up my units on the right, I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. By 11, the line touches the arrow, and it just means that the x value keeps on going to the right, to positive infinity. That's why we get the domain is all real numbers. Okay, let's try find the range now. Remember, range are the y values, and so we're going to look at the height of the graph. And so at the lowest point of the graph, I'm going to draw a line right here. All right. But technically, right, this is not the lowest point because there's arrows. So the graph keeps on going down. The highest point on the graph is right here. So let's count off my units now. On the positive side, I'm going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm sorry. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So the highest point is 9. You notice though, there are no y values up here for the graph. All the y values are below 9, going all the way down to infinity. All right. And so my range, right, is going to be y, right, less than or equal to 9 because all the y values are below 9. All right. So take away from this, for parabolas, if there are no restrictions on the graph, if the graph has arrows, the domain is always all real numbers. Now the range is different. All right, let's look at another graph. Now this is a linear graph. And I want you to notice, if you have a straight line graph and there are arrows on both ends, all right, the domain is all real numbers and the range is all real numbers. All right. That's when you have a straight line graph or a linear graph with arrows on both ends. The domain is always all real numbers and the range is all real numbers. All right. Now, this is a good one because it's a parabola, but there are restrictions now. You see there's a closed circle here and an open circle right there. So we're going to apply the same principle, all right? Let's go after domain first. So let me put D for domain, all right? And let's put all for range. Now remember for domain, I'm going to draw a line on the left side of the graph and on the right side of the graph. So let me draw my line. Oops, that's not what I want to do. Highlighter. So on the left side, I'm going to draw a line. On the right side, I'm going to draw my line. Now I'm going to count my units on the left side. So let's see. On the left side, I'm going to have negative 1, negative 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right? The line stops at 7. So on the left side, at negative 7, so I'm going to have negative 7 right there. But guess what now? That's a closed circle. So I'm going to use a less than or equal to with the negative 7. Let's count the units on the right side now. I have 1, 2. But this is an open circle. Therefore, I'm going to use the less than symbol with that. And of course, I put my X in the middle because I'm dealing with domain. All right. Now for the range, again, the range is a height. So I'm going to draw my line on the bottom and on the top. So here we go. Highlighter. Let's go with green. On the bottom, I'm going to go right here. And on the top, I'm going to go right here. Okay. So let's count up for units on the bottom. Let's go. Pen. On the bottom, I'm going to have negative 1, negative 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the lowest point in the graph is at negative 8. All right. And because it's a solid line, right, I'm going to use as an 8. I'm going to use less than or equal to. Let's count the units on the top. If you notice now, on the top, it's just 0, right? The line doesn't go above, the graph doesn't go above 0, right? So it's at 0. Now I have a closed circle and an open circle. Which one am I going to use? In a case like this, I'm going to go with a closed circle. So less than or equal to 0. All right, and I put the y in there for my range. See that? All right, let's try another one. Okay, this is a good one, another parabola again, but guess what? We have restrictions, all right? So again, for domain, I'm gonna draw my lines on the left side, on the right side. So here we go, highlighter. I draw my line here, oops, not a straight line, but, and then on the right side, I'm gonna draw another line, okay? So for domain, let's go with my pen again. D, let's get some more space. I feel like I'm D and all for range, and D for domain. So on the left side now, let's count how many units I have on the left side. -1, -2, 3, and 4. So on the domain starts at -4, but this is a closed circle. So I'm going to use less than or equal to. Let's go on the right. I have 1, right? This is 0, this is 1. And so what this is, if you notice, the line touches the open circle. So that's going to be, I'm going to use a less than with that. See that? And of course, I'll put my X in there for domain. For the range now, let's draw, again, range, we're looking at the Y axis, right? And so it's the height of the graph. And so I'm going to start with the lowest point here. And then the highest point is right here. Okay, so let's get my units now for the lowest point. So I'm going to start off with -1, -2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So my lowest point is -7. And of course, this is a solid line right here, so I'm going to use less than or equal to. Let's go. Let's see where my highest point is. This is 0, 1, 2. But then this is an open circle. The line touches an open circle. And so that's going to be less than, and I put my y there. All right. Let's see what we have next. All right. This is a straight line graph. We've noticed now on one side of the graph, we have an arrow. And on the other side, we have a closed circle. We're going to use the same principle, right? Same principle, domain. We're going to draw lines on the left side, on the right side. So let's put D for domain and R for range. All right. So D for domain, again, we're looking at the X values. So I'm going to draw a line on the left side crossing the X axis. So here we go, highlighter. Okay, so on the left side, it's right there. On the right side, it's right there. So let's count off my units. On the left side, all right, I'm going to have -1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But guess what? The line, my line touches it, it touches the arrow. That means the graph doesn't end there. It keeps on going. Therefore, my domain on the left side is going to be -infinity, right? It is not -5. The graph doesn't stop here. It just keeps on going. And on the right side now, my units are 1, 2. On it's a closed circle on the right side, so I'm going to use less than or equal to. And I'm sorry, on the left side, right, where the arrow is, it's going to be less than. And so I can put my X there. Now, there's another way you could write this, all right? Since all X values, all the domain, right, are from 2 going all this way, all right, all the way to infinity, all right? I could say then another way of doing this is saying the domain, all the X values, right, are less than or equal to 2. That's another way of writing it. For the range, I'm going to draw the line at the lowest point of the graph. And so that's going to be right, that's the lowest point right there. And then on the top, I'm going to draw a line again. Okay, so let's see how many units are on the lowest point. Okay, and so this is 0, -1, -2. So it's -2 where the line touches a closed circle, right? So I'm going to have a -2 here. It's a closed circle, so I'm going to use less than or equal to. On the other side, I'm going to have 1, 2. But guess what? The line touched the arrow, right? Therefore, the graph does not stop here. It keeps on going. So all the y values just keep on going up, right? Because graphs keeps on going that way. And so that goes to the on this side, 1, 2, right? The graph keeps on going up all the way to positive infinity. So I'm going to have a positive infinity right here, and I can use a less than and put my y value there. Another way I could write this, because all the y values, right, start at -2, right? Start at -2 and go all the way up. Doesn't stop there. All the y values are greater than -2. So I can write this as y is greater than or equal to -2. That's another way of writing it. All right, so that's domain and range. And let's see what we have next. I think that's the last one I'm going to do on this one. Okay, yeah, that's the last one. All right, guys. So that is the video on domain and range. Use the same principle that I show you here to answer those questions on the review. Okay.